very seldom that we get an opportunity to find out more about what it's like to be a soldier. And it's only appropriate on this Remembrance Day that we have an opportunity to find out a little bit more. And we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel retired Brook Bangsboll of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Colonel, thank you so much for taking the time out to do this with us today.
My pleasure.
If I may, I just want to go through a little bit of your family history within the military. Your paternal grandfather was an admiral in the Danish Navy.
Correct.
Your maternal grandfather was in the Canadian Army, the 116th Battalion in World War I.
Correct.
Your Danish-born father served in the Danish Navy, the Norwegian Air Force, and the United States Army.
Correct.
Full career in the U.S. Army. Both of your brothers served in the Canadian Navy and the American Army, respectively. You joined the U.S. Army right out of high school, graduated from the West Point, I suppose it would not have been the academy, it would have been the prep college. You returned to Canada, graduated with an economics and a political science degree from York University in 1984, and went directly into the Canadian Air Force.
That's correct, sir. You've got it.
What exactly does the term service mean to you personally?
Well, that's a great question. Having been brought up, as we call it, Army brats, living on various Army bases around the world as a kid, you see service all the time. You see the soldiers marching, doing training, you see people saluting each other with respect. You get a sense of it early that there's something special about the military. And then as I grew up and decided to make that my career, the term service to me is fundamentally your willingness to commit to something bigger than yourself, to be willing to serve, and at a cost to your family, time with your family. You know, you miss birthdays, you miss anniversaries, you miss Christmas once in a while because of service requirements, but that's part of the deal when you sign up, and you're willing to put yourself in harm's way, and that's not always very pleasant, but that's part of the deal as well. So you have to be prepared to do those things to be able to wear the uniform.
Is that a mechanism that members of the military service use in order to, I suppose, weigh the pros and cons of your service? This is something that is part of the gig?
It's something more I think you learn as you progress through your career. You see times when you're asked to do something and you have to make that decision. Can I do that deployment, or, you know, do I want to try to decline it and maybe move off to a less operational job that is maybe less interesting because I'm not as committed as I thought I was. But I don't think it is an expectations within the network, the larger scale of the military. They expect that of their service members, but it's not something they try to teach you. It's something if it's not in your heart, you're not going to do it.
So the inherent part of being a soldier has to be something within you?
Initially, I think yes. For you to stick to it as well. You know, a lot of individuals join the service and realize it's not for them. You know, I kind of had that my first go at it with the Americans. I was young, and I did not really have a good grip on what the expectations were, and I realized it wasn't for me at that time. So that's why I changed course for a bit. But I eventually realized that, you know, the military is what I wanted. Maybe I wasn't cut out to be that Army soldier running around in the woods. I might want to be an Air Force guy.
What prompted the choice to opt for the Royal Canadian Air Force as opposed to one of the other disciplines?
Well, that's very interesting. It wasn't part of my decision, but later on it proved to be a confirmation of a good decision. As you mentioned earlier in your introduction, my father served in the Danish Navy, Danish or Norwegian Air Force and American Army. So I had a brother in the Army, I had a brother in the Navy. I had to go to the Air Force.
Okay.
Just to round it out, and he loved that. You know, he never pushed me there or any of us there. But I think in his older days, when he looked back and would smile at us, it made him very proud that he had 3 sons that did 3 services, just like him.
You graduated in 1984 from York University with a degree in economics and political science.
Yes.
As a logistics officer, I would think that the economics would definitely come into play, and the political aspects of being within the military as well would, I guess that kind of education would have assisted you along the way in your military career. Had it?
Yes, it to a degree, but I'll be honest with you, and this is being very honest, it was a means to an end. I needed to have a bachelor's degree to become an officer in the military, so I needed a degree. So my choices, I was interested in economics. Political science is also very personal interest to me, but really the things I learned about the military and how to operate in the military, I think I learned much earlier, watching and listening to my dad and my brothers, how they conducted themselves in their military roles. I started to learn about the importance of planning, discipline, which is all part of logistics as well. The political side, not so much. I'm not a political person whatsoever.
But you know how to do the dance.
Well, that is, I guess, a bit of politics. You're right. But you learn that dance because you don't do it right all the time. And there, a number of times as a junior officer, you did things wrong, and you get corrected for it. And that's one thing about the military. They see a fault and they address it. And if you fix it, you're good to go and carry on. And it's when you don't fix it that's when discipline has to take over, and they might have to deal with you differently. But they give you a chance. They give you great opportunities of making decisions. You're a lieutenant and you're responsible for millions of dollars of equipment. You see guys flying Hercules who are 25, 26 years old. That's a great deal of responsible for a young individual. So they trust you, and as long as you prove that you can do it, they'll trust you more.
You've been everywhere in your extensive career.
Pretty close.
If you could detail the deployments that you've been on and maybe discuss a little bit about the lifetime of learning that you've been able to accumulate, and is that something that you really had any expectations of when you began your career?
I'll admit that I hoped that my career would allow me to travel. I love the idea of serving my country, but I love the idea to be able to travel and see the world. And part of that I probably learned from my parents, because they'd travel all over the world. They were assigned to Japan and all over the States and Germany. So I had internally I wanted to travel. So that was part of the benefit for me being in the military and being in the Air Force and being in the logistics air movement side. I kind of guaranteed that I would travel to various places around the world. And part of those operations that were surprising me, of all the places I've been, some of the one place that I think I love the most, and I would go back anytime, is the Arctic, northern Canada. It's remarkable up there. The beauty, the majestic, scenery you have, and the people, but the sheer magnitude of the distance and the danger that's there. But it really was, for me, one of the first times I said, this is why I joined it, to be able to stand here and see what I'm seeing and contribute to the mission in a really unique place. So that, I would say, that would be probably one of the highlights of my career. And then on the flip side, I probably never want to go back to Rwanda. That was not a nice place, and it was a bad time. And thank you very much. I use that as my example because if I hear anybody complaining about the Western world, or Canada in particular, about we don't have enough freedoms here, and they don't like the politics, and they don't like this, don't like that, I just say, ever been to Rwanda in the middle of a crisis? You ever been to places in Africa that are crumbling about you? Canada is great. You have a fire, the the fire department shows up. You have a problem with security, the police show up. You know, you can vote, you can go down to the store and purchase any food you want, anything you need. There's nothing like it. We've got a great gig here.
Well, it's been said that you have to go away in order to appreciate what you have at home. Curious to, you know, sort of find out from you, a man who has represented this country all around the world. You represented the Royal Canadian Air Force, but you were in deployments all around the world in pretty volatile areas. How is the Canadian military perceived around the world?
Totally positive. I'd have to say that as a general statement, but it has evolved over the years. When I first started, there was times we were going on deployments. You really felt like you were the orphaned child, that you did not have the resources you needed or wanted to execute your mission effectively. And you looked around you and you were, you know, maybe sharing an airfield with the Americans, and they have everything. You know, sharing with the Germans, and they're pretty well equipped. There was many times that we were relying on our allies to help us. But over my career, I saw that development change, and we did improve our logistics capability. That, you know, getting things like the C-17 for a logistician was a huge event for us, you know, because it really gave us that strategic capability, and it felt like our government was really starting to invest in us, which was really felt great. And I'll be honest with you, when we were my last deployment was in Kuwait. Obviously, the Americans were the big boy on the street, but you know, the Italians were there, the British were there, the French for a bit, the Danes. And they were smaller than us, and we ended up being able to help them. And that was one of the most rewarding parts of my career, was having Canadians pitch up and go help the Danes set up their camp. You know.
You've been involved in peacekeeping missions around the world. You've been involved in combat missions around the world. For those who may not know the difference between the two, what are the two different roles that Canadians developed a reputation around the world for in peacekeeping, and then being involved in an active role from 2001 in Afghanistan?
That's a very good question. The way I would approach that is, even if you're in a peacekeeping mission, you are there prepared to defend yourself and defend those nations and or host nation that you're working with in a combat situation. You have to be prepared. You can't just go in there. It's peacekeeping, so we put our weapons down. We're not prepared. You have to be prepared and committed to be able to step up if you have to step up. So if you think about what happened to General Dallaire in Rwanda, that was a tragedy because he was handcuffed and was unable to bring to bear those resources to protect people. And that's, I think, the root to all his spirits that or devils that chase him. But to get back to your question specifically, so if you are prepared in a peacekeeping mission to do anything you need to do to rescue, to defend, to advance the mission, if something goes sideways, you're there ready. In a combat mission, such as what happened in Afghanistan, where I never served in Afghanistan, but that's a much different focus, that you are there actually to you know, put kinetic energy against the enemy and potentially destroy them, and that's tough. You know, but that's what you're paid for. You're executing what the government of Canada is asking you to do, or your allied countries. You have to be prepared to commit to those kind of things, and that's part of it.
As a leader, you are placed in situations where you have to make really, really difficult decisions. Was there a specific process that you're trained to go through, or is it something that you sort of went through a mental checklist on your own in order to formulate a decision that obviously is going to have pretty serious ramifications?
Again, great question. I think it varies from individual to individual based on their experiences in the past. But the Canadian forces, like our allies, NATO allies, we have a system, a decision-making process. It's called the deliberate planning process, where you analyze the situation from many different perspectives, and you start building the plan, which helps you make decisions on what it is you're going to need to execute your mission. It's very deliberate. There's a lot of analysis, a lot of individuals are involved. It's not one person just standing up there. You know, there is a commander making the final decision, but the commander has many people that are making, doing an analysis and providing him with data and saying, this is what we believe is going on, this is what we think is going to happen, this is what we have in resources to do it, we're short this. We need to fill this gap. So if you can go through that process and be well prepared going into your mission, you've done your homework. Now, one of the funny sayings we use in the military, a plan is only as good as soon as the war starts, because as soon as you engage the enemy, the plan kind of goes out the window, and now you're just kind of riding a coattail, figuring out what you're going to do now. But if you come in prepared using the planning process that we've been taught for years, at least you've got a very square foundation that you can deal with. And the great thing about it, since all our NATO allies use it too, we know how they're thinking, and it helps us to make sure we're aligning with them.
After you retired, you took a job as Director of Communications for the Canadian Corps of Commissionaires, and you've since left that in January of this year. Retiring from the military, it has to be a difficult transition for a lot of people, going from a position of importance on sometimes national and international levels to being the guy that needs to mow his lawn.
Yes.
What was that transition like for you?
Well, the important thing is all sailors, airmen, and Army guys still need to mow their lawn all the time, even when they're deployed. And sometimes the military is good about that. They'll set you up with a program and someone to cut your lawn for you. So, yes, preparing to retire is a challenging thing. After 35 years in the military, I was ready to go. Still miss it every day. Certain parts of it I miss. That era when I was a captain and I was doing a lot of flying and doing a lot of traveling, I miss that. I don't miss so much the stuff at the end when I was a colonel and working behind a desk all the time.
How many hours in an F-18?
Oh no, I'm a what they call a trash hauler. I was transport, so I got about 2,000 hours on a Hercules.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So to answer the question, preparing for it is important, but the military is very good about that. They've got a great system to help you transition into civilian life. Joining the Legion, like we are here today at the Orleans Legion, it was important. The Air Force Association I'm a part of, the Maritime Aviation Association I'm part of. It all helps me, or helps us, staying connected with former military colleagues, so you can still have that chat over a beer about the time when, even if you don't know the guy, you just like to hear their stories and then compare your stories. That really helps the transition into civilian life. Problem being, and I'll stand on my soapbox on this, as the current chairman of 410 Wing, Air Force Association, like many other legions and squadrons, we're not getting the members to come out. There was a great groundswell after World War II. Thousands of guys wanted to join the Legion, and there was thousands of them. Well, our military is much smaller now, so the pool of potential candidates is getting smaller, and we're struggling, and it's a tough thing to try to keep up with, and COVID was not good to us. 410 Wing, as an example, we had over 115 members before COVID. We're down to about 70 because of just aging, and so it's tough.
The Legion has a program now, a recruitment program to get new members. Yeah. Is that something that you're actively pursuing with members of of our active force
We are
today?
trying to. We are trying to. Later this week, Air Force on the Hill is going to be there, and I know some of our senior Air Force Association people will be there, and they will be talking to senior Air Force officers and chiefs, saying, look, we've got to fix this, because if we don't do it now, 10 years from now, the Legion won't be around, the Air Force Association won't be around. It'll be a tragedy, because it really is a wonderful membership that just carries on a legacy of service. And, you know, that's all we do. We do community service stuff. So it's good.
My grandfather was a captain in the Signal Corps, retired in 1968. So growing up, I knew just exactly how important the Legion was to him and other veterans of the military. What's it going to take to, I suppose, elevate the Royal Canadian Legion into a situation where they've got that level of importance?
Good question. I think it's a mindset that we've got to change some of the attitudes of the younger service persons. I joined the Legion and the Air Force Association at the end of my career thinking, okay, it's a transition. Some of these kids only stay 10 years and then they move off into other careers outside the military. Maybe they haven't, really drank the Kool-Aid and want to stay into that community, but I think they're missing out, because it really is a great opportunity for them. So as our demographics change within the military, we need to change our strategy on how to bring them in, because whatever we're doing right now ain't working.
Let's get back to your retirement for just a moment. You remain involved volunteering for worthy causes. Canadian Soldier On program is one. The British military's Help for Heroes charity is another. And the U.S. Wounded Warrior program and the Invictus Games that were held in Toronto in 2017. I suppose that's something that's, all of these causes are very near and dear. How important are these initiatives to make sure that the transition for veterans who have had so much more difficult times moving into civilian life after their military careers, how important are these causes, and how significant do you think they'll be in the future?
Great question. They're hugely important. But the first thing I would say is that the Canadian Forces in general has improved its system of support to its service members enormously over the years. There was a time when I just started, and when you were retiring, I was watching guys that had 25 years before me. They're basically handing their ID card and see you later. You really get treated much better now, much more support all the way out, and even after. Like Veterans Affairs is much more robust in its support to the veteran. So having said that, our system is better, which is wonderful. I'm so glad to see that. And then these other programs, and one I'd love to mention while here, the Pepper Pod, which is something that's up in Gatineau to help former service women deal with difficulties they had during their service. A good friend of mine runs it, and it's a great organization. So you take the Pepper Pod, you take Wounded Warriors, Help for Heroes, Soldier On. They're all programs that are specifically identified to help those who have been injured in some way, both be it mentally, be it physically, or both. That it allows these guys, these men and women, to be able to reach out to somebody that can relate to what they've been through. And I think that's the key thing, is just being able to relate at first, that you don't even have to tell me your story. I'll listen. I'm there for you, because I've been there. I'm aware of it. So those programs are huge. And when I mentioned the ones that are in Britain and the United States, I was just fortunate enough to be posted down to Washington, D.C., where I was working in an international unit at the Pentagon, where I got to know a wonderful British officer who was doing a lot of the work in that. So he drew me in to say, well, here, we could use a Canadian helping us doing that. And likewise, the American Wounded Warrior program. And that's what I was saying earlier about having that connection with our NATO allies. We understand the situation. So if you have a program that's similar to ours, I can help you. There's no barriers between our countries.
Is there one situation within all of the ways that you've assisted these programs that continues to inspire you?
Well, they all do. I wish I had more time to be able to devote to some of these programs. But the one that is most nearest and dearest to my heart right now is the Pepper Pod, because a good friend of mine's working on it all the time, and it's fairly new within the Canadian Forces. Or it's not within the Canadian Forces, but it is being supported by them. And it really is addressing one of the most tragic situations that has ever occurred, and that's the abuse of women in uniform. Abuse of women, period, is horrible, but to do it to a fellow service person is criminal. And so now that it's been brought out to the forefront, I'm so glad to see the support is coming to these people that they deserve.
With that in mind, the Canadian military has gone through so many hoops and hurdles over the last few years with that specific issue. Have we turned the corner yet?
I don't know if I'm in a position to comment on that. I hope we are, or have begun to make that turn, but it's a long, long process. And you know, the tragedy of having some senior officers do some very unprofessional things has not helped, and that hurt all of us down to our core. To know that when your leader falters, that's trouble. And so I'm optimistic that we are starting to turn the corner. General Ayer is an amazing officer and a fabulous leader. I have all the respect in the world for him. I think he is the guy that is really helping right this ship.
35 years in, if there was one piece of advice that you could offer somebody who's contemplating a career in military service, what might that be?
Be prepared to continually learn. It's one thing I loved about the military. You are constantly being challenged to learn and validate your capabilities. It's not like you pass the course and there, I'm done, put it up on the wall. For the rest of your career, you're going to be expected to be able to fulfill everything you learned on that course to the best of your ability. So if you're going to join the military, you better be prepared to commit yourself to a career of lifelong learning and expectations that you will be expected to perform at that level in an appropriate manner at all times.
Lieutenant Colonel Brook Bangsboll, thank you, retired. Thank RCAF. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, sir.
Much appreciated.
Much appreciated. Thank you.